All right, peace. We're live. Excuse the sounds in the background. We're going to be speaking about Moorish history. We're going to be going over history specifically in the Iberian Peninsula from medieval times up to the 18th century. If you have no interest in reading really, really old books, going through history, you might as well go on and get up out of here. You're going to be bored this ain't for you. But this is what we're going to do today because we want to discuss the history behind this holiday known as Thanksgiving, and we're going to give everybody a cultural understanding. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and make sure you share the video, tag some people in it, help to get these numbers up. I'm not going to take up too much more time. Let's go ahead and get started now. Morris, don't go anywhere.
I am not a Negro, black, colored, African American. I'm a Moorish American. Peace.
Yeah. Hey, 5 on the right, 2 on the left, man. You know what time it is. Yo. We just Moors in America, soared through the shores and endured criminal acts of war on our character. 7 years after the 4th score, no reward. Shout out to the most courageous, they was jumping over barriers. Where does that compare to you? We come from a place where you scared to visit our area. We come from a place where it's scary for good Samaritans. Heavy luggage we carrying, babies having babies. It's crazy being American. Praise the one and only Allah, there's no comparison. La ilaha illa Allah, body and buried gin. Laughing at you clowns like ha-ha, dodging the Nephilim. Conquer lower self with a high, follow your regimen. Way before they came we were gods and now we specimen. Tried to take the light from our eyes, thank God for Edison. Then they put the wool on our eyes, it's so embarrassing. Now we travel frequently, we should invest in Sheraton. All of us got gold on our bodies whenever we stepping in. Screaming Ramadan, Mubarak, training the flesh again. Wishing we could move as a unit just like the Mexicans, dodging all the foods with estrogen, synthetic medicines. All sin isn't devilish. Sometimes the decisions that you make come for a better gift. Sometimes when you sin is to relate to all your brethren. Heavenly gates all in our face, we the champions. We live in the sky, we see the angels on the chariots, waiting on the $20 bill, face a Harriet. I bet you I'ma carry it. I'm in love with music to the point I wanna marry it. But my love for people is greater, so I write messages. Largest spending power, but we still sit at a deficit. Living amongst prejudice, even at our residence. Moors in America, flourishing, excellent. Let's buy up some neighborhoods and groom our own president. Yeah. And I come to you today with all intentions of spreading love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice.
All right, peace. Here we are, Morris. Let's go ahead and jump into this. I want to just send some love to everybody out there for chiming in the chat. Peace and love to you all. We're gonna have an interesting discussion today. Maybe something you can share with the family. If you are gathered with your family, this would be a great video to watch, especially for those that are interested in history. Want to have some understanding behind these rituals and things that people do that maybe don't even really have an understanding on why we do it. Right? Why do we do this? What's this Thanksgiving stuff about? Now there is another video on the channel that actually speaks about Thanksgiving. And shout out to you, brother Neil Bay. Appreciate you for sharing this. While we're on that topic, though, just want to ask everybody else here to hit that share button. Let's all share this. Let's help to spread that information out there so that regardless of whether YouTube or Facebook or any other platform is sharing this, we can spread it because it grows from us, by us, right? It's by the community. This is a grassroots type thing. But yeah, so there is another video on this channel to check out, something that you can actually watch with the family for real. It's a video I did with my daughter speaking about Thanksgiving. Really good video, and I'm trying to remember the channel address. Struggling with that, but here we go. So there's another video on here too. If you go to Moors in America on YouTube, you could just scroll down, go to community, click the tab that says community, and you'll see that video right here. Thanksgiving exposed from a Moorish American perspective. Also, you could just type the search on here. You just type the search and type Thanksgiving, it'll come right up. And it's not talking about eating turkey and dressing and all that stuff, right? So history, and it's short, only 20 minutes long, going over the history, giving people a thorough understanding what's really going on. We want to know what's going on in behind these celebrations. We don't want to just, mindlessly do this stuff. All right. And yes, so for the Moors, I know you may already understand, but we're not all in the know. So we do want to share this to help get that information out there. And we're gonna speak on some things that you might not know about. So tune in. Everybody hit like, hit share. Let's go ahead and just get started right now. So right away, just speaking about Thanksgiving, right? We have the just want to jump into the real reason that Thanksgiving is celebrated. So it's not about pilgrims and so-called Indians sitting down and eating together, right? The Indians helping the pilgrims who are coming in to colonize pretend to be on friendly terms, respecting different nations and making treaties and things like that. But in actuality, the whole time they were trying to take the land. All right. So you had the Treaty of Grenada. The Treaty of Grenada. Let's read this. So this treaty was signed in 1491. There was another one. There were more capitulations after that. But the Treaty of Grenada, as you see here, it says also known as the Surrender of Grenada or simply the Capitulations, was signed and ratified on when? November 25th, 1491, between Boabdil, the Sultan of Grenada. Grenada's in Spain, as it says here on his Wikipedia, Grenada in Iberia. So this was when Spain was known as Al Andalus, and it was a portion of the Moorish Empire. This was where the Moors ruled from for a while, for several centuries. So Boabdil at that time was the Sultan of Grenada. He was one of the kings of Moorish Spain. All right. And Ferdinand and Isabella, the king and queen of Castile. Castile was a portion or kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula. Right. See, they unified it. Their power was growing by the late 1400s. So they were the king and queen of Castile, Leon, and Aragon. Now, Aragon definitely was a Moorish kingdom or a Moorish um, territory, but they had lost. So these people actually were ruling Castile, Leon, Aragon, and Sicily. And so this agreement ended the Granada War, which it started in 1482 and culminated in the siege and battle of Granada, which began in the spring of 1491. Boabdil, as you can see in this picture, he's depicted in here kind of as a pale skinned European looking person, but with a little swarthy, little darkness in there in the painting. They did this a lot with the Muslims. They either depicted them as dark skinned, quote unquote Africans, or as basically Europeans with a little tan going on. So during this, when this treaty was signed, Boabdil wound up going into exile, and he didn't live very long after that. Right? He was shamed. He was attacked when he went into Africa. He wasn't respected for what he did, handing over Granada, the last Muslim stronghold in Andalusia, to the Catholic King Ferdinand of Aragon. Now, one thing I want to say about this too, there was the last Muslim stronghold in Andalusia, but the Muslims, the Moors, were still in power even while this was going on. They were losing their grip on certain areas. They're still in power, but we're going to show that tonight. Okay, so just going back to this, remember that was signed on November 25th, 1491. The treaty provided a short truce, followed by the relinquishment in January 1492 of the sovereignty of the Muslim Emirate of Granada, which was founded in the 13th century, to Catholic Spain. The treaty guaranteed a set of rights to the Moors, to Muslim inhabitants, including religious tolerance and fair treatment in return for their surrender and capitulation. Right, so it guaranteed these things. They kind of reneged on that big time. The capitulations granted native Jews in the surrendered territories the choice of either converting to Christianity or migrating to North Africa within 3 years. That was subsequently superseded by the Alhambra Decree of 1492, which forced all Jews in Spain to choose between conversion or expulsion. All right, it doesn't say death in here, but also death, right? So they had harsh treatment after this occurred. And then, of course, the next year, after the Treaty of Granada in 1491, then Columbus sailed for the Americas, 1492. Right now, they're starting to get um, control and access to other portions of the Moorish Empire, which included the Americas. Wasn't nobody coming over here thinking they were coming to India. They knew this was a portion of the Moorish Empire. And I'll just read through some of this. The capitulation of 1492 contained 67 articles. It was supposed to perfectly secure in their persons, families, and properties, both great and small. They should be allowed to continue in their dwellings and residences, whether in the city, the suburbs, or any other part of the country. Their laws should be preserved as they were before. No one should judge them. Their mosques and religious endowments should remain as they were in the times of Islam. No Christian should ever enter the house of a Muslim or insult him in any way. They are acting as if they're going to continue the treatment that the Muslims had bestowed upon them when they ruled. And not trying to sit up and act like the Moors were just so righteous and upstanding. But they did allow people to practice whatever they believed. They did have freedom to do that. They did do a lot of things that helped Europe tremendously. Okay. That no Christian or Jew holding public office by the appointment of the late Sultan should be allowed to exercise his functions or rule over them. All Muslims taken during the siege of Granada, from whatever part of the country they may have come, but especially the nobles and chiefs mentioned in the agreement, should be liberated. Um, and so there's a lot. I'm not going to read everything, but you can go to Wikipedia, read about the Treaty of Granada. So this happened, and it was decreed by the Pope at that time, right? That this was a time of thanksgiving. It was to be recognized as a time of thanksgiving because they had taken the last Moorish Muslim stronghold, right? We see a picture here. It says forced conversions under Francisco Jimenez de Cisneros were seen as violations of the treaty and the main reason for the later rebellions by the Muslim populations, right? So people were being forced to convert, they were being expelled. You got to think like the Moors had been ruling since the 700s, right? 711. and then they're finally leaving late 1400s, almost 1500s, 1491, 1492. So they basically, this was their homeland. You've been somewhere for almost 8 centuries. That's your homeland, right? So anyway, saying Pope Alexander the Sixth, it was saying that 3,000 Muslims were converted in a single day, right? And the methods that they used were like torture. It wasn't just like, they were converting because this was the best thing to do. This is the only way they can stay where they were from. And then, also they were being literally tortured, right? So just wanted to speak on that real briefly, but we have some more. There's a couple other things that I wanted to mention too. Now I wanna go into this book, and the book is called Muslims in Spain, 1492 through 1814. All right. So yeah, when the dumb diverses go into effect, this is really increasing the pressure on the Moors wherever they are, wherever the Europeans encounter them, right? Because their purpose now is to subjugate them and convert them no matter what. Okay. And when you're in subjugation to someone, you're going to be in an inferior position, which we still are going through now. I agree with that. The Inquisition, the Reconquista, all that stuff is still going on right now. That's why we still come under attack as a whole, but also because we, in general, are not adopting our own ways, right? We're continuing under the conditions that they created for us specifically to be able to rule over us. They deemed us savages. They gave us Christianity, and we are then their property. But going into this book, some of the things that we're going to talk about, just to give you a brief idea or understanding. Right. Let me read this briefly. Okay, here we go. So I just want to read this in brief just to give you some examples of some of the things we're going to be going into. So in this book, Muslims in Spain, 1492 through 1814, is giving you the lowdown on what was really going on in that area. And if you follow along with this, you'll see how this concerns us. Right? We're not talking about some stuff way over there that has nothing to do with us. No, we're not. All right. So just bear with me. So I just want to give a brief summary, right? So going into this book, it's telling about several different situations that were going on in Spain. I'm just going to read this briefly from chapter 3 of this book. Speaks about the survivors, the thousands of Muslims that stayed behind, what they were going through during that period, and it gives you an example. It says, Muli Mule Ahmed was son of Mule Abdullah or Abdallah, and a brother of Mule Hassan, right? He had lived in Sicily since childhood during the rule of Muley Hassan and Muley Hamida. Remember, Sicily, at that time, portions of Italy and Sicily, especially that island, were was coming under the rule of the monarchs from Spain, right? It says in 1570 he offered himself to Philip, right, King Philip of Spain, Philip II, as the ideal candidate for expelling Turks from Tunis, right? So this person who was a Moor or a Morisco, he's trying to make a deal with the king of Spain, right, to work to help to expel the Turks from Tunis because of his ancestry and because he has been called, he has the right to the throne, right? So he's saying, hey, I'm gonna help you take Tunis so that I can take the throne that I have a right to, right? And he asks assistance on the grounds of his 30 years of service to the monarchy, offering his 4 wives and 7 children in Sicily as potential hostages. He proposed founding a Muslim kingdom that would be a vassal state of the Christians. All right. And that was not a new idea in Spain's North African policy. So going back to that uh Treaty of Granada, where you had this ruler, Boabdil was the last sultan of Granada. They were always making deals with Moorish rulers or leaders to take more portions of land from the Moors. This is how they got Spain back, right? Making deals with the Moors who were in power, right? And then expelling the Turks. They're fighting the Turks and Moors. Sometimes they're specifically talking about the Turks from Turkey, but then also they would call Moors who were Moroccans Turks as well, right? So remember this while you're eating that turkey, that Thanksgiving and then carving up the turkey. You're carving up the Moorish lands. You're taking the land back from the Turks. That's why it's being carved up. And that's why it's made a whole ritual. They even had us taking on this ritual to the point where you have so-called black families, the dad or whoever's the head of the family, the head of the household, he goes and gets the knife and he comes and he starts to carve the turkey, right? And we doing this stuff like fools, like straight up fools, slaves. Don't even know that we the Turks. They're carving up our land, taking it from us, right? That was just one example. We're gonna talk about that tonight too. And then there's another thing I want to show you. So, like I said, man, we're gonna be going through the history and making sense of this because it's ridiculous for us to be going around playing this ritual out and not knowing what we're really getting into. And you can't afford to be a mindless fool out here, right? It's not just about entertaining yourself, watching shows, playing video games, spending money on stuff and just entertaining yourself, right? So just going back into this, right? Let's see. Something else I wanted to share briefly. Briefly. Okay. Um and so well, you know what? I'm just gonna work my way up to this, right? We're just gonna go ahead and get this started. But you get what I'm saying with this, right? So we have this these um these terms that are thrown out here that don't make any sense to us unless you know that you're more. And we want this message to be able to go beyond just people who already know that they're more. We want this to be understandable for people from all different backgrounds and to see that these things aren't just coincidences. Islam, brother Shael, when you see um, these, not even just with the holidays, but just all types of things that are played out in front of our face, and we don't have any idea really what's going on, what's really being said, and that it applies to us. So a lot of people are going to think like, "What? Who cares about the Moors in Spain? How does this apply to us?" And I want to explain that to you. I want us all to be able to see this because the wool has truly been pulled over our eyes to the point where anytime you see or hear the word slave, right, you automatically um see a so-called black person, right? To the point where black people just associate themselves with slavery, see themselves in the past as slaves and accept it. And so anytime you have slavery that's occurred in the past, they can show you a black person and you'll just accept it as you, even if it's a false picture, even if the people in that time period who were enslaved were not so-called Africans, right? They can tell you that they were because we've taken that on wholesale as you know, our identity, right? That's why you have the ADOS, this American descendants of slaves, and you have people that are trying to push this narrative for us to take it on, right? Like this is who we are. But it's not. It's not, Morris. And so I want to show you some things. Now, some of these things might sound crazy, for those that have never been exposed to this type of information before. But let's go ahead and go into this. So, um, yeah, it's insane, right? But we know that we're not slaves, and slaves don't automatically just apply to us. We know that whether regardless of in regards to the so-called African Americans, the Asiatics of America, regardless of whether your ancestors were actually placed in chains and working on plantations and things of that nature for free, we all were marked with the slave terms, right? As the prophet Noble Drew Ali so eloquently put in Act 6 of our divine constitution. Those terms of Negro, black, colored, and Ethiopian, and even nowadays African American, right, are terms for slaves. They were given to slaves by slave owners during a specific period, but that time of slavery is over now, right? So we don't need to see ourselves as slaves all of the time. So let's speak about history that's uncommon, right? Now, what I'm speaking about specifically right now is the slavery on the Barbary Coast. Now, in this area, the Barbary Coast, we will be talking about North Africa, right? You see here, well, we have a picture, okay, an idea. You see the region of North Africa. If you can see this on the screen, the green portion of this map, right? And then you have the Barbary Coast area, right? Which is going to, as it says here, be the coastal regions of North Africa or the Maghreb, all right, and the Ottoman borderlands, right? So we're talking about this area that even extends into the Mediterranean, okay? Because these were the areas that the people who lived in that area, for the most part, had control of, and for a very long time, for centuries, they had control of the waterways. Okay. And if you can just look up slavery on the Barbary Coast on Wikipedia. There's actually a page about it. And I'll just briefly just go over this, right? So slavery on the Barbary Coast, see Barbary slave trade, was a form of unfree labor which existed between the 16th and 18th centuries on the Barbary Coast area of North Africa. According to Robert Davis, I believe Robert Davis is he's a researcher or a professor, excuse me, at the Ohio State University, right? And he actually wrote a book on this topic. Now, between 1 million and 1.2 million Europeans were captured by Barbary pirates and sold as slaves in North Africa. And the Ottoman Empire between the 16th and 19th century. So if you want to know who the Barbary pirates were, as it says here on Wikipedia, they were mainly Muslim pirates and privateers. So some of these pirates were actually pale skinned Europeans who had been captured at some point, or who were I guess you could say were given as tribute to the Muslim Moorish leaders, like the governors, the kings. They were given as tribute by different European nations and European towns and villages. They were given as tribute to these Muslim rulers because this was the agreement that they had worked out with those leaders so that they wouldn't be robbed, so that they would be allowed to participate in trade, right? This was like the tribute that they had to pay to the rulers who controlled that area, even the area where they lived in, right? And so sometimes they would give their children, their boys, to these Muslim leaders, and then they would become part of that Muslim leader's army, right? And then you also had ones that were captured and sold into slavery, and a portion of getting their freedom was proclaiming Islam, and now they can work and become part of the Muslim navies, right? So they operated their navies for the most part through pirates or privateers or corsairs, right? Pirate is kind of like the vulgar term for corsairs, and it was also a way that the Europeans could attack them and say, "Hey, they're not official. They don't, they don't operate properly. They're criminals, right? They're pirates instead of corsairs, which would pretty much be the same thing, but it's more like more of an official term, right? So this is saying that 1 million and one, or between 1 million and 1.2 million Europeans were captured by Barbary pirates, and they were sold as slaves in North Africa and the Ottoman Empire between the 16th and 19th centuries. That's between the 1500s to the 1800s, right? And actually, you had this occurring before then too, right? So the estimates have been challenged by different historians, but it's true, it's fact. We know that this happened, it's been documented. There's no question about it, right? And later on, you had the Barbary Wars, which took place where you had the European nations and even the European colonies, the early colony, which gained its independence, the United States of America, they were fighting back against the Barbary pirates. They were tired of paying tribute to them, um, many times paying tribute to get some of their people free from slavery, right? But this is something that's been documented throughout history and even hidden in plain sight to the point where it's even in like modern literature, and we don't even know it. We don't see it, right? And so even though it's not taught to us, it's there, something that everybody can look up on their own. And the for the most part, the majority of these people who were enslaved were pale skinned Europeans, right? As it says here, you have slave markets in the Barbary states. The Barbary states, remember, along the coast of North Africa. European slaves were acquired by Muslim Barbary pirates in slave raids on ships and on coastal towns. And then you had this occur from Italy all the way to the Netherlands, Ireland, and southwest of Britain, and even as far north as Iceland and into the eastern Mediterranean. This is a huge area, people. A huge area. Let's just pull this up on a map so that we can make some sense of this, right? So if you're not, very well versed with um European countries, like, you don't know where all of these countries are on the map. Here we go. So it would make sense now for Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, right, Libya, for these people to be raiding this coast, like along the Mediterranean, right, getting these towns. All right, that would make sense. Even Croatia, Bulgaria, some of these places, right? It would make sense because you can see how this is not far from them, but it's, they're going as far as the United Kingdom, right? Which, Britain, the Netherlands, and as far north as Iceland, right? They're hitting up Norway. So they're pretty much going after all of these towns. They're going after coastal villages. There was a movie we watched Hey, do you remember the name of that Dracula movie we watched? Scylla, you remember the name of the Dracula movie we watched recently where they were showing this to a degree in there? Okay, so I don't remember the name of the film. It was a Dracula movie though. It's not that old. And in that film, they showed the guy who became Dracula. He's like the local leader or ruler, and he winds up being approached by the Turks. They're coming for their tribute, and they're like, "We want so many, 100 or 1,000 boys, right?" And they even want him to give his son as tribute. Okay, and he in the movie, the guy who becomes Dracula, this had happened to him when he was a child, right? His father was the king previously, and he's basically, sold his son into slavery, you know, like giving him as tribute, but you basically sell him in slavery to save his people, to save his kingdom, you know. It didn't kill him, like so the guy who becomes Dracula, he's in the Turkish army now. He's learning Arabic and all. He's learning how to fight. He's a top soldier, and now he's able to come back. He served his 20, 30 years, however long his sentence was, and now he's able to come back. Okay. And so he winds up getting approached with this, and he's got to do the same thing with his son. And I'm only saying is even in that same film, and if we could get the name of it, that would be great. But even in that same film, they showed how a lot of the soldiers, not all of them, but a lot of the soldiers were pale skinned Europeans. Some of them blonde hair, blue eyes, right? And since they had been given as tribute as young children, they learn Arabic, whatever language they needed to speak, Turkish, and they've been completely bought in. They're Muslims, and they're fighting for the Turks. And so this this and it didn't just occur with boys. That was what they did a lot because this is how they strengthened their armies, right? But they also would take tribute of women, young girls. They and then also you had the raiding of the villages, the taking people in as slaves, the pale skinned Europeans as slaves. And this occurred for so many centuries that it lightened up the population of North Africa to the point where today many of the people that you would call Arabs are, pale skinned, like they look like regular Europeans, some even with blonde hair and blue eyes, right? Because that had been going on for so long. I'm not just making that up. If you can get the book Golden Age of the Moor by even Van Sertima, which also has contributions from various scholars, various professors, you can see that same explanation in there. And that is Dracula Untold. Thank you. The untold story of Dracula, right? That just goes right over a lot of people's heads, but it's in there and it's laid out, right in your face so that you can see. I thought the map was showing up here. I guess it wasn't, but I was just showing you. Oh yeah, Last Voyage of the Demeter. Yeah, that was a good one too. But just this is so you see that in in some aspects, right? In like pop culture and the media, the movies and shows, but we don't know what we're looking at, so we don't know what we're actually seeing. But as you can see, the the Moors, the Turks, were getting on down as far as what enslaving people. And I'm not saying it's like it's something cool, right? I'm not trying to you know make it seem like, oh, this was a cool thing to do. This is good because obviously it created enemies. It created people that resented the Moors and they paid this back down on them. But once again, just showing they weren't just raiding the towns in Italy and the places close to the Iberian Peninsula, close to North Africa. Nah, all the way up to the Netherlands. You're getting Britain, you're getting Ireland, you even getting Iceland. Okay, and just going back to it. Now, these were people coming from Tunis, Algiers, Tripoli, Morocco, and they enslaved over 1.25 million Europeans in North Africa. And that's just from the 16th to the 18th century. All right. And in actuality, this was going on for a longer period than that. But just on to err on um the safe side, right? To in this Wikipedia, which is once again this information is coming from Robert Davis, who is professor at Ohio State University. But in there, he's saying this was going on for roughly 250 years, right? Nonstop. So, that's insane, people. That is absolutely insane. And so all of these people were brought in, and many of those people converted to Islam, right? Because when they convert to Islam, they were given their freedom on the spot. They're able to work and get paid. They're able to take up wives, right? So this was going on for a long time, and it created a whole new class of people, a whole new group of people. It like changed the face of North Africa, and so that went on for a very long time. Just showing some of that history, you could go look up the Barbary slave trade too. It even has a Wikipedia page. Okay, it even speaks about things like how this was in pop culture. The book by Miguel de Cervantes, I believe that's Don Quixote, right? So several books that have become a part of like a part of our culture, right? That have been held up in esteem, right? They have these stories of the Europeans being sold into slavery. But if you don't know what you're reading, you don't even know what's going on, right? And then this slave trade that's spoken about on here, though, this was speaking about the revolt of those Muslims against the Europeans for specifically for what happened after the Moors were expelled from Spain. So this was revenge. They're coming back because you had so many Moors whose property was taken from them, right? Their homes, their property, their finances, their way of, making a living, all of that stuff was taken from them. And so on the other hand, you actually had an amount of payback, right? Or an attitude of, hey, we taxing y'all for that, right? And so this is also another reason why they went so hard. Okay, but these estimates are conservative in here, and then 1 million might not sound conservative, but it is because this is just talking about a 250-year period from the 1600s throughout the 1800s or the 1500s throughout the 1800s, right? So roughly 250, 300 years, but it actually was going on longer than that. So that's another thing that people should understand about history, to get away from this this idea that slavery automatically is tied to so-called black people, right? This is more research. Ohio State News. When Europeans were slaves, research suggests white slavery was much more common than previously believed. Um, Editor's note for an update on this story. Visit why is a 16-year-old book on slavery so popular now? And then this is then going to the Professor Robert Davis, speaking about the same thing. Um, Christians, European Christians being enslaved by Muslims in North Africa, 1530 to 1780, far greater number than ever estimated before, right? And so it's kind of been just once again hidden in plain sight. The whole beginning of this country, the United States of America, is tied into their paying of tribute to the Moroccan Barbary states, and how they're, how they decided to fight back and try to end this, and also they're fighting back at the negative imagery that came from supporting these Barbary pirates, right? Because the people were embarrassed about that. They didn't want to have anything to do with that. All right. And so this ties into what we're really going to be speaking about. Okay. So once again, I'm not trying to take away anyone's holidays from them or anything like that. We just want to give some more insight, some more understanding to what's really going on. This is a good book to go over. Muslims in Spain. I advise everybody, especially the Moors, to make sure you have a copy of this book and to actually read through it, right? Just going through some of the chapters. Muslims in Europe, 16th to 18th centuries. Now, remember, the Muslims were in Europe much longer than that. Um, the Moorish conquest started in 711, lasted for nearly 800 years into the late 1400s, but the Muslims didn't just all disappear, right? And this is where we get into this whole Thanksgiving thing here, because we're not understanding that, the expelling of these Moors, the taking of their property, the torture, the things that they went through, all of that plays into this ritual that we're playing out every year, not even understanding that we're still carrying something out that's against us, against our own nature, right? And not only that, but that the whole idea of a Thanksgiving being behind the surrender of the last Moorish stronghold. This was a thing that enabled the Christian Europeans to start their dominion, to really get things ramped up and start to empower themselves, right? So that's not like something that we should be celebrating. I'm gonna just speak about a few things that I have highlighted in this book, and we'll open up the floor to questions too. If you have any questions, just feel free to speak up, or any comments feel free to share in the chat. There's just a few things in here I want to speak on. So we're not gonna read over the whole book, and just bear with me as I scroll through here. I just have a few things that jumped out at me that I wanted to share with you guys. All right. So just in a brief nutshell, when the Moors ruled Spain, um, not only did we bring higher learning, we brought the sciences, the arts, all of the arts. Um, we increased the literacy rate of all of the people living there, not just Moors who lived there, right? It was beneficial for everyone. You went from a place that was almost desolate, that didn't really have a lot going on, to a place that was flowing, that had agriculture, right? We brought natural sciences, or I guess you say environmental engineering, where they had irrigation now, all types of foods and fruits like oranges, all types of things are being cultivated here. So this is improving the palate of the people, right? And then also, as I was saying before, with the arts, um not only arts is in, like music and things of that nature, but also the sciences, right? um Health, right? All of these things are being improved, medical sciences, everything. And then literally you're having the first universities in Europe, and it's occurring because of the Moorish rule, what the Moors brought. to this place. They actually helped to bring this place up like hundreds of years, right? With the science and understanding that's being brought there, and then also having a society that allows for religious freedom for people to have the ability to have different philosophies and ways of life, right? And so this encourages free thought. This is encouraging people to to help to assist to move society forward, right? But then there was a dark side to this, right? As the Moors are improving society, they're also creating enemies, right? Because for one, the Barbary slave trade that was being spoken about, that thing actually was something that was going on for a long time. As I was speaking about that movie Dracula Untold, you had things like this occurring for literally hundreds of years where towns were being raided, right? They're having to give up the youth for tribute, and then literally people just being sold into slavery, right? Then you also had some of the kings, some of the rulers, the governors of these different territories who had who had several wives and also several concubines, right? Right. Some of the ones who are extremely wealthy, they're having like hundreds of concubines. So they have all of these European women that they're not official, they're not wives, they're not entitled to any any inheritance or anything like that. And so if there's any children coming out of these types of unions, right off bat, the children are going to resent the Moors. They're going to resent them because you're now, you're an outsider. You're not even a part of this the inheritance and the other benefits that come from being with the people that's in power, right? So they're creating enemies right there, right? Right there in their homeland now, their new homeland where they live at, right? So this wound up backfiring over time. By the time you get to the 1400s, the empire in Europe is in decline. Even I'd say into the 1200s, you had several portions of the empire that were losing power, and some of the more lighter skinned cousins that they had were making alliances with the Visigoths and some of the other tribes from Northern Europe, and they're starting to empower themselves, and they're going in a whole different direction because they also resent the Moors and want to subjugate them, right? So, you're looking in here, it says Spain that enslaves and expels. Speaking about Moriscos and Muslim captives, this is talking about after Moorish Spain fell, right? You had the several Muslims now who were living there who had one choice. Now, even though the Treaty of Granada said that they will be able to live freely and keep their possessions and to practice their religion freely and everything of that nature, that didn't last for long. Within like 2 years, they're already talking about you convert or you get, you leave, right? You get expelled. You get up out of here, right? And so this is something that's not really talked about, but it was a huge deal for those people, right? And so many of these people, did convert to Christianity, but it wasn't like it was a real choice for them, right? They became Christianized. They referred to them as Moriscos then, once they took on these Christian names because they had a process that you had to go through where you became baptized and you had a Christian godfather, right? Whoever your godfather was, maybe the local ruler, local governor, maybe even a king or somebody, became your ward, right? Because you're coming in now to become a Christian and you take on a Christian name, meaning you drop, the Arabic name or whatever you had before that, right? And so this was happening in wholesale, and you still see the remnants of it, when you go to places like Spain, even Italy, Sicily, which was a portion of the empire, right? And it's still there to this day, the remnants. But this occurred over several hundred years. It didn't just all happen overnight, right? When 1491, it took centuries for this to really take part, but they immediately began putting a push on for all of those Muslims, like it says here, who remained in the lands reconquered by the Christians, the Reconquista. They immediately put that pressure on them to convert. And so there were several Muslims in this area, especially in the Iberian Peninsula. And here it says the Mujahirs of Castile, the Moors of Aragon, the Serains of Valencia, all estimated at between 300,000 and 600,000 souls, were subsumed under the term Moriscos, which arose after the Christian conquest of Granada in 1492. And the capitulations offered to the vanquished promised that all Muslims who chose to remain in the peninsula could do so freely and continue to exercise their religion. Their status continued the practice of the Moors, right, where you have tolerance, right, and especially towards people of the book, which would be Christians, Jews, and more Islamic practitioners, right. So under the Islamic rule, you had the tolerance, but then they immediately felt that pressure to convert began to be applied almost immediately. And when certain leading Nasrid families accepted baptism, tensions arose that led to the Albasian revolt in Granada in 1499 after spreading to the Alpujarra Mountains. It was crushed in 1501. Um, you had an immediate result. It was the 1502 decree of forcible conversion imposed upon all Muslims in Castile and Granada, who would be called Moriscos from then on. In 1515 and 1516, conversion was imposed on the Mujahirs of Navarre, and in 1526 on the Muslims of the Crown of Aragon. The Moriscos were already stripped of their land and property and forced to adopt Christianity. It remained under suspicion by the authorities, especially the Catholic Church, which was loath to allow any religious manifestation other than its own. This position hardened after the Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563, and the consolidation of the Counter Reformation. The Moriscos' restiveness brought about a new uprising, the War of Granada or the Alpujarras, 1568 through 1571, again savagely repressed by the king's armies. Most of the conquered survivors were exiled to other areas across the peninsula, while many prisoners, including men and women, were enslaved. Some actually coming to be owned by other Moriscos. Hostility against them never ceased, as they were thought to form an Ottoman fifth column within Spain. The Ottomans, they really worried about the Turks because the Turkish army was strong, right? So they're worried they're gonna go back and they're gonna help the Moors, right? Or they're gonna be working with the Turks. But remember, it was also confusing because they refer to the Moors, even those who are Moroccans, consider themselves Moroccans, they refer to them as Turks too, right? And they did this all the time. All right, Islam, I see you in here. All right, Islam, brother Kobe. And so we just gonna keep going to this. So you have a lot going on, and none of this stuff is being explained in history class, or at least not any history classes that I've been in, right? But these Moriscos lived in three regions, most of them in three regions of Spain. The existing bibliography is especially rich for those former kingdoms: Aragon, Valencia, and the former Nasrid kingdom of Granada, which included the region of Almeria. But there's much research on the lives and fortunes of Moriscos in all territories of the monarchy. In Western Andalusia, the main centers were Seville and Cordoba. In Murcia, most thought not all studies have considered the Moriscos of the Valley de Ricote and La Mancha, that we are well informed about the Campo de Calva, Calatrava and Almansa. The former kingdoms of Castile and Leon have yielded studies centered on Toledo, Ciudad Real, Cuenca, Salamanca, and Zamora and Avila. The case of Catalonia is also well known, right? So, in the present study, we cannot enter deeply into the Morisco's minority relations with its Christian neighbors and exploiters. We know how the story ends with the expulsion. Although a few Moriscos managed to remain by various means and still fewer were able to return, the immense majority left Spain forever. Right? So the majority of people had to get on down and not never to return. Right? Um, we have many studies of the Moriscos who settled in North Africa, particularly in Morocco and Tunisia. Many of them harbored an understandable hatred for the country that had expelled them. If I do take up the Moriscos here, it is because even though their forced conversion made them nominal Christians, many continued loyal. So it's saying that even many of those who converted, since they did so under duress, right? They weren't really Christians, right? So they continued to practice Islam. You know, with greater or lesser intensity and authenticity, they remained loyal to Islam. Consequently, many of these crypto Muslims were pursued by the Inquisition, making that institution's documents one of the richest sources for studies of this population. In places like Cuenca, the Balearic Islands, and many other points in the peninsula, the grim pressures of the Holy Office revealed that some of these new Christians had not made a true conversion. It is equally true that many of them were really no longer Muslims, even though their old Christian neighbors assumed that they still clung to Islam at heart. So everybody's expecting. No, they did Obama. They always like Obama. He's a Muslim, right? They were doing them like that, even if they, had actually given up Islam. But many of them did not really give up Islam because they just did it because that's the only way they could stay. The sacking of Morisco communities after the Christian victory in Granada resulted in tensions, open conflicts, bloody, repressed uprisings, and enslavement of the defeated rebels of 1571. Right in the movies, you always see the rebels. The rebels are fighting against the empire, right? The whole Star Wars thing. You got the rebels fighting against the empire trying to suppress them, right? This was the Moriscos fighting the Reconquista, fighting the Inquisition. They're not gonna tell you that though. But and then they want you to celebrate it. It's Thanksgiving, celebrate it. Carve up that turkey. But in spite of this violence and domination, some Moriscos and some old Christians managed to coexist and even collaborate. We know that some sectors of Spanish society were opposed to the expulsion for a variety of reasons, a fact that explains, among other things, why not all the Moriscos were expelled and how some did leave Spain and managed to return, right? They had some kind of, relationships going on with the Europeans that were there or business relationships, right? Where they tried to work with them to keep them there. You also had like a lot of the Moriscos, like since they had lost their property and they would work jobs that nobody else wanted, you know. So that's why some of them, they would like tolerant, let them stay. But in general, they were being forced to convert. And that has to be understood because, like, of course, we went through this process here in the Americas, right? And this is something that we ought to understand, right? It's simple, just like that, right? This whole process of this Reconquista, this Inquisition, it never ended. It just as the European nations' power grew, and they were able to go to other areas. They just as soon as they realized they're dealing with Moorish empires, they carried out the same process, right? Convert or die. You must convert. All right. And so that's what we still dealing with. But you gotta understand this. And it's important that more of our people, begin to see things for how they really are. Like, cause it's just like asinine for us to be carrying on these traditions blindly, not even knowing how it relates to us or what we're actually celebrating. Last thing you want to be doing is celebrating your downfall, right? I'm sure there's nobody here that's like, dressed like a pilgrim and doing all this stupid stuff to celebrate it. But still, even still, you don't know what it's really about. You don't know what you're doing. And none of us want to be in that position, right? So there was just a few other things I wanted to talk about in here. I don't want to make this video like super, super long, but there's a lot of good information in this book actually, right? So in addition to like the regular people there who were there who either had to convert or leave, you also had people who had ties to royalty who were of noble blood. Okay. And before I read some of this stuff, I wanted to read this in particular because it shows how a lot of the royals the people of noble bloodlines, they wound up, if they didn't Iberian Peninsula, peninsula, they wound up spreading out and going throughout Europe. Okay, and they were taken in by the different, I guess you could say, noble families of Europe. They became parts of those families in many cases. Got married into it. Like that bloodline was actually seen as something that was desired by the different European monarchs, right? So a lot of these people, wound up becoming part of the royal courts in different parts of Europe. But just reading this chapter is royal exiles in the 16th century recover the throne or convert. A phenomenon in the 16th and 17th centuries has received little notice from historians until recently. The existence in Spain and its Italian dominions of Naples and Sicily of many Muslims belonging to reigning dynasties of North Africa who had been toppled from their thrones. Once on Spanish soil, they sought support and aid, material aid to recover the status lost through internal strife in their homelands. These persons, usually in family groups, were in Alfonso Aciro's words, rulers in the Islamic societies to which they belonged, monarchs or members of the royal families who determined the destinies of a given kingdom. Their social rank and prior position granted them a swifter welcome and more efficient protection in the Christian world they now entered. Their counterparts, the Christian monarchs, received them and offered them shelter in the face of initial mistrust by the wider society, which, however, eventually celebrated the arrival of such high ranking Muslims as a moral victory over Islam. These royal exiles were refugees of quality, expected to provide a potential benefit in the form of ransoms or alliances, or they might reject their former life and become new Christians, able to occupy distinguished posts in the service of the regime that had welcomed them. Right. And so a lot of them got absorbed into these different European monarch families. And in many ways, they saw that, okay, we taking on these Moorish rulers and they have ties to the actual whatever Barbary states in North Africa. And so they're like, okay, this will be a win for us because now we got one of your, ruling class. And, we can use this now in terms of the trade and things that the Europeans are trying to increase. Because remember, they're going to be paying tribute to these different Barbary states. Sometimes, in some cases, they're paying tribute to several Barbary states at the same time, right? So they wanted to start to, to bring these monarchs in and make them a part of their royal court. Okay, so just going back to it, most of them were monarchs, princes, and other members of the ruling dynasties, often accompanied by their families and partisans. Wattasids, and Sadids from Morocco and Fez, Zionids from Telemunken, and Hafsids from Tunis. Alfonso Acero stresses that Spanish monarchs behaved well towards these Muslim princes and even the pretenders who saw entrance to the Spanish North African presidios or the peninsula itself. They were treated as royal personages, and welcome was extended to their families, followers, and goods. Security and protection was promised by virtue of their social rank. As a rule, these persons were received by the monarchs who subsidized their resettlement in Spanish territory. But we must not forget that just as elsewhere in Europe, Spain considered these exiles to be bargaining chips and hostages. See how it says just as elsewhere in Europe, they considered them to be um, exiles, and they were bargaining chips and hostages of the authorities in advancing their policies toward Muslim countries. Their treatment was a function of whatever relations prevailed with the rulers of Morocco, Algiers, and Tunis. Right, and then it speaks about the Wata Wata seeds, saying that uh, these men, beginning in the mid 15th century, political life in Morocco was marked by the decadence of the Maranids or Benemerines and the rise of popular devotional religious movements. The latter were led by men considered saintly, the Morabitos, right? Arabic, Murabitun. Their ascendancy contributed to a fragmentation of power in the region, clashes between cities, and the emergence of Sharifism the current that sought to rule based on its leader's prestigious descent from the Prophet Muhammad. Right, the Wattasids had been governors or regents under the Marinids, and after adopting the arguments of Sharifism, were able to seize power in 1472. All right, and they ruled until the Sadids took over 1554. They ruled Morocco in spite of pressure by Portugal, Spain, and the Ottoman Empire, as well as many internal revolts. They conquered Fez 1549 and massacred the dynasty's last sultan, Ahmad ibn Muhammad, along with members of his court. A survivor, Abu Hassan El Buazon to Spanish chroniclers, became the head of the deposed dynasty. He had been king of Fez from 1524 to 1526, then was deposed by his nephew and relegated to the governorship of Velez. Velez was I guess you could say it was like a region or a province in Spain. Okay, so in 1549, April, with five followers, he sought refuge in the Spanish presidio of Melilla, where he was later joined by his children and other relatives. This thing is showing like a breakdown of his family line. Um, He was also accompanied by several gentlemen and officers from Velez. His arrival proved awkward for Melilla. Its governor feared the presence of such a large number of faithful Muslims, and the town had few resources to support them. In spite of his entreaties, right, Abu Hassan was not allowed to move to Malaga until July. Malaga is also in Spain. The captain general of Granada, the Count of Tendia, considered him a man of much loved and well established, who had a strong reputation in Barbary. All right. And so he came with his family and then some members of his court and um his gentlemen, like and officers, right? And it's saying that the fact is that while some thought of him as a potential hostage, useful for advancing Spanish interests in North Africa, for others his presence in the peninsula represented a danger. Hang on. Abu Hassan asked Charles V to help him regain his throne. Two of his sons, Mulay Nazar al Nazir and Mulay Muhammad, accompanied him to Spain, the latter joining his father once he was in Germany. Other companions included Mulay Abdullah, nephew of the king of Velez, gentlemen and servants, including two called Abraham and Hamid. In early November, Abu Hassan, with an interpreter and 10 Muslims, six on horseback and four on Malaga or Valladolid, to meet Maximilian of Australia, the Habsburg regent. The Moroccan asked for soldiers to help him take Arquila, which the Portuguese wished to leave, and aid in expelling the Sadid Sharif from Fez and other kingdoms he possesses. But he was given only 1,000 ducats and clothing for his retinue. Right. So this is what was going on for hundreds of years too, with the people of the noble class who were, I should say, Moors of the noble class. Right. They were in Europe working with the other monarchs, right, to get support for them to go back into wherever portion of North Africa they had ties to, and they were doing this in exchange, like, okay, we'll do this for you, and I'll do this for you in return, right? So this has been going on for a long time, and this was even going on during the Inquisition, right? So he asked for these soldiers and for finances to help him. Having received so little from the regent, Abu Hassan decided to go in search of Charles V, who was in Central Europe at the time. His party reached Genoa by way of Barcelona on January 24th, 1550, and arrived in Brussels in March. They did not get much satisfaction from Charles, who had discouraged their journey because we are so occupied with current affairs. But Abu Hassan remained near the emperor for several months and even took part in fighting the Protestants. Charles assigned him an annuity of 2,400 escudos plus 600 for his relatives. During that period, more of his family members and partisans arrived in Melilla, and some went on to Malaga. For Francisco Verdugo, who was in charge of providing material to Melilla, wrote to the regents that in all the ships of the line that I send to Melilla with mortar and provisions and arms, and groups of them will arrive as they have been doing for some time, and I'm heartily sick of them and determined not to receive them in my home, even though I know that on leaving it they will find no one to give them even a jug of water. Maximilian, remember, he's the prince or the king from Austria. He told Verdugo to make every effort to send the refugees back to their own country, though not at the expense of the royal treasury, suggesting that maintaining Abu Hassan's family and followers had become an economic burden. His sons, Muley Nazar and Muley Muhammad, had also been receiving 50 ducats a month since June 1550, while in April of that year. And his nephew, Muley Abdullah, Prince of Fez, had been granted 75,000 reals for his expenses in Spain and Portugal. Even the servants, Abraham and Hamet, received 10 ducats each, and these amounts were only part of what the Moroccans cost. And so this was like a game for like a lot of the Moors, of noble descent, to hit up these different European monarchs for resources, for finances, right? Um, and this was going on for hundreds of years too. On July 12th, 1551, Abu Hassan and his retinue landed at Barcelona in the train of Prince Philip, who was bound for Valladolid. The monarchy continued to support him, assigning him 3,000 ducats a year, starting in 1551. In early 1552, Abu Hassan asked the prince for more financial aid and for his return to Morocco. Weary of waiting for military help that never came, he moved on to Portugal, where he received a warmer welcome. In January 1554, joined by leaders from Algiers, he defeated Muhammad al-Sheikh al-Mahdi and entered Fez as its conqueror. But in September, he lost both the city and his head at the hands of the Saadi Sultan. Right, so he was killed within a few months. Some of Abu Hassan's relatives managed to cross into Spain. One was a wife who converted to Christianity and took the name Juana, Queen of Fez. She remains in the records until 1557. Another wife, Lala Zahora, arrived in December 1573 to El Pinon de Velez in Spanish hands since 1564. She took the name Juana on her baptism, styling herself Queen of Velez or Fez. And that's what's in this uh that lineage chart you see up there, right? With his descendants. Lala Zahora, baptized as Juana, Queen of Velez or Fez. And then he had another wife too, also who took on the title of like Queen of Fez. Okay, so this was like a game that was going on for several years, like hundreds of years actually, with the Moors who of noble descent. Um, it just goes on and on about this line of descent, their ties, what they were doing, how they were interacting with the nobility class of Spain, and how they were being treated. There was another descendant of Abu Hassan, his grandson, Moulay Allah Marine, hastily proclaimed king after his father's death. He left for Spain in the mid 1570s, took a roundabout route, landing first in Cape Verde Islands. He fell sick and had a vision of the Virgin, leading him to become a Christian with the name Gaspar de Benmenorin. His travels took him on to Madeira, Terça Island, and Lisbon, Portugal. And on his arrival in Madrid with a large following, he was received by Philip II. He claimed himself to have left Morocco in 1570 and been baptized in Spain. From 1575 onward, he served in the royal armies in several ways, on ships guarding the route to the Indies on the islands of Santiago and Cape Verde, and in the conquest of Tersa in 1582. Shortly afterwards, in Naples, he married and persuaded the Council of Italy to double his monthly allowance. Later on, he entered the service of Archduke Albert in Flanders, but was back in Naples at the end of the century. At about that time, he asked the king to increase his allowance because, since he has become a Christian and served your majesty, he should be the equal of Don Carlos and Don Philip, sons of the king of Tunis, who received 100 escudos of maintenance a month, and he should be honored with a religious habit so as to serve your majesty better as he wishes to do. So this is one of the things that's going on, right? Just, you know, maintaining favor in exchange for um, working with the European powers, if they're trying to retake some type of throne, right? And for the most part, they're just hitting them up for money and resources. It's the exact same thing that the rulers in North Africa were doing when they're forcing the Europeans to pay tribute. So you could tell they still, no matter what the Moors or Moriscos are saying out of their mouth, they still resent the Europeans. They did not, respect or honor them. They had no love for them, right? They're trying to get back at them any way that they can, right? And so, man, this thing just goes on and on, right? There were so many people claiming to be of noble class, which you have to be able to trace yourself back like 7 generations to be a noble, right? So you had all of these people all over who were doing this, many of whom who remained Muslims, right? And then some who took on, Christianity. And then you even had ones who took on Christianity, but then like soon as they got the chance, they reverted back to Islam, right? And this was just like a process that was going on for, you know, from the 1500s on up to the 18th century. So there's a whole bunch of examples of this. Not going to go on throughout this, but if you want to read more on this, check out the book, Muslims in Spain, 1492 through 1814. There were some other things that I wanted to talk about too, right? So just living during this time period, right? 1492 to 1767, living in freedom amongst the infidels in times of conflict. So you had the exiles who had fled North Africa for political reasons. So you still had people coming from North Africa into the Iberian Peninsula. And this was because of all the instability now that's occurring in North Africa. You have all of these different leaders that are fighting, taking over, and they're people who are not really in power for a long period of time. So you have all this upheaval. You have somebody who, kills their cousin or someone to take over power. So the other person was only ruling for 3 or 4 years. So you got constant political upheaval and things of that nature going on. So you still had North Africans coming into Spain, even though they know that more than likely they're gonna have to become Christian, right? As it says here, like those who did might have converted before crossing to Spain, a choice they usually, but not always, made their entry is harder. It made it easier for them, right? But for the most part, they're fleeing whatever's going on in their native lands, right? It says here some Moriscos managed to return to Spain after their expulsion. So you also had those who had been kicked out during the Inquisition. Because remember, for the Moriscos living there, they're constantly being watched. They're being tested. People are, the Jesuit priests, right? They don't trust them. Always, distrust. They're always coming at them, accusing them of being Muslims, and basically threatening their lives and putting pressure on them also to prove that they are not Muslims. Um, so you had all these different reasons why you had this constant Muslim presence in Spain, even going up to the 18th century. Um, as it says here, the flow of these people, like including the Moriscos who returned to Spain, it was never interrupted during this period. So this like 250-year period. And then you always have this state of conflict between the Hispanic monarchy on one side and the Sultan of Morocco, the Dey of Algiers, the Beys of Tunis and Tripoli, and the Caliph in Constantinople on the other. And there's even an account in here speaking about the Dey of Algiers, and they're talking about how these people are coming to request an audience with the king, right, in Europe, and they're claiming to be ambassadors of the Dey of Algiers, and they got to ask them questions because like they're not even explaining their process and why they're really why we're supposed to trust that they're actually ambassadors. They can't even tell us like what the day means. What is day? What is that? Right? And it's not a king is what they're explaining because they're saying like the day is an elected title that's actually given to the ruler who's chosen by the military. Right? So it's not something that's inherited. It's not a king. And so they're just like you had a lot of Moors who are actually running game. They're using this as a way to get paid, and they're trying to play the Europeans, right? And so this is crazy. It's insane because most of us don't notice. So hang on, Moors. Just want to share a few accounts with you, right? So here's one account speaking about Abraham Serquan Amor, who came from Tunis on royal business. Because the more Abraham Serquan, our subject and vassal, is come from the city of Tunis for matters that pertain to our service, and to negotiate certain things, he must travel and act in our kingdoms and lands, and our wishes that he be well treated and not be disturbed in any way. We ensure that Ibrahim Serquam, with all his gold coins, silver, jewels, clothing, and other effects he may bring with him. Right. And this is from Ferdinand the Catholic, and that was June 30th, 1493, right? So he's given this safe passage, right? And he's representing um, someone from Tunis who's he's on royal business. And then also in September 1494, a safe conduct was issued to an ambassador from the King of Tunis, to Don Kap, a Moor ambassador from the illustrious King of Tunis, sent to us that in any city or seaport of our kingdoms and territories, as he thinks best, with 7 or 8 Moors, whose names we record expressly here, may go to Barbary with any vessel or ship owned by Christians, with all their clothing, money, goods, and merchandise, right? And they're getting these, safe passage notes from the nobility. 4 years later, 1498, the king ordered a payment of 4,870 sueldos in Valencia coin to a new ambassador from the Sheikh of the Gibrans, possibly meaning the Jerba. Asmet Abin Kukuma, a Moorish ambassador sent to us from the Sheikh of the Gibrans, this amount, 4,870 sueldos, royal coins of Valencia. In 1499, Ferdinand approved a grant to Gonzalo of Burgos for 10,000 maravedis in coin of our kingdom of Castile, which we send him to help with the expense of certain Moors ambassadors from overseas. A number of North African envoys must have fallen into financial straits, since the monarch also ordered the viceroy and the procurator of Majacora to get these 3 Moors for clothing themselves and for returning to their country, what you think is right, so they may leave contented. In 1512, Sheikh Lahassan, ambassador for the ruler of Tunis, was in Castile. He was given leave to travel through the kingdom with his baggage and foodstuffs, together with all the Muslim slaves he was able to ransom. Right. And then this is just giving examples of the different embassies that came and met with the leaders. The capitulation signed in 1521 between the king of Telemancan and the second Marquis of Comares in the name of the Spanish monarch stipulated that if the Maghrabi sovereign should wish to send their majesties his ambassadors or messengers with or without gifts, or to complain of any wrong done in the matter of his rents or his vassals or any other thing that should be consulted with their majesties, no present or future captain general of this kingdom, or his lieutenant, nor judicial officers, nor any other persons may impede their travel or that of those with them whom they bring. Rather, they shall be offered the ship of the line needed for their journey at a reasonable price. And if they bring merchandise, the duties owed on it shall be paid for them. As of now, we know only one ambassador sent to the peninsula in 1533, when in the town of Espejo and Cordoba, another capitulation was signed between the Marquis of Camara's governor and Captain General of Telemencan and Tunis. And Al-Qaid Boabdillah, the king of Telemekin's ambassador. Boabdillah declared his intention not to return home until the agreement was signed, until I depart in my proper way, even if I were to be here my whole life and spend every penny I have. And then we have another one with the Queen Isabella in 1531. Salim bin Musa Al Zahui, during a visit to Spain, came to the court of Castile, presided over at that time by Queen Empress Isabella of Portugal. He gave her a message from Muhammad Sharif, Sheikh of the Arabs in the Oran region. Let's look at the Oran is in Algiers. Hold up. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So the Oran, we're speaking about Algiers, right there on the coast. Northwest Algeria. And just going back. So um he gave her a message from Muhammad Sharif, Sheikh of the Arabs in the Oran region in early 1532. He returned to court bearing letters from the military governors of that region, Hamida el Abda, Muhammad el Anvari, Muhammad bin Marzak, and the sheikhs of the Hussein family. On this occasion, he was accompanied by an official from Iran, and the group met in Cordoba with the captain general of the Oran Presidio, who lived in the city. When the queen received them in Medina del Campo, they asked her for help in capturing Algiers and defeating the Turks. And that was like the key word, the key way to get the different European monarchs to work with you. Say, hey, we want to help you defeat the Turks because the Ottomans were kicking their butts. Another example from later, 1604. One of them must have left for North Africa in February of that year. There's a set record of the departure of the ambassador from Kuku and the Moor who goes with them. The ruler of Kuku must have been pleased with his four envoys' actions, since he sent another, Musa bin Ahmad, late in 1603. This may have been the Moor Musa who returned to Kuku in 1605 with gifts and 62,000 reals de Villon from the viceroy of Majorca for the North African king, having performed his mission well. And the Moor Musa accomplished well what he was ordered. For within a very short time he gave your letters to that king, and he now returns by order of his master to give the said letters and a report on the state of those affairs. All right. So these type of treaties, these types of actions were going on, ongoing between the Moors and the um, peninsula, and other parts of Europe the whole entire time, even during the Inquisition, even after the Inquisition, even though we know the Inquisition never actually ended, right? It's still going on. Let's see how long we at, Morris. How many of y'all still with me? Right? If we could get some more people, please, to hit the like and the share button, just to help us spread it, get this information out there. Once again, we just want to share another take on history, something that's not commonly spoken about, and just to help spread information and spread awareness. Right? Um, we don't hear about things that like this that often, right? I do want to read something else though, just to give you some more accounts of what was going on in Europe, right? So, where are we? We're in Spain. Okay, so this is speaking about a Turkish ambassador, right? Who I believe is in Madrid, Spain, and it's saying that This letter was sent by his secretary Pedro Coloma, wrote to the Marquis of Mirabel. He said the nuns were forced to apologize for having sung two serious songs for the ambassador, even though all of them had been wearing hoods, their faces covered with masks. This incident led to censure of the Turks' customs, as they were suspected of seeking contact with prostitutes in Madrid. Philip IV therefore ordered, through several decrees of mine, and especially through one dated January 15th of this year, I've instructed you to order the watchmen to take great control care to patrol the street and house of the Turkish ambassador, because of the news I have heard of the excesses, and sins that were being committed there, proceeding from the liberty and license of commerce between the Moors and certain Christian women who entered there. And that the first woman you lay hands on of those who were causing the scandal should be made a strong example of, naming her publicly. And so I instruct you to call the watchmen and order them to keep their watches strictly or in any form that seems fair and promotes continuous patrols by that Turk's house. And let any woman who enters it be arrested and held as a stern example that such great wickedness calls for. Right? The decree ordered that a house in the Calle de Alcala, where such deeds were supposed to be taking place, be closed. And in a house that they call the Little Taverns of Parla, where every night 15 or 16 women with others who live a debased life meet many men from the household of this Turkish ambassador, as well as some English ones, and grave excesses, scandals, and offenses against God are committed. It does not seem that this embassy achieved an improvement in Hispano-Ottoman relations. It might not have been as a representative has it claimed, at least in the opinion of the Moroccan ambassador Mohammed B. Abd al Wahab al Ghassani, who visited Madrid years later. The Turkish embassy that came to Spain 40 years ago claimed to come from Constantinople, but it had actually been sent by one of those madmen who wanted to create difficulties for the Sultan of Constantinople. Um, Going on. It's saying in 1690, the Moroccan Sultan Moulay Ismail sent his vizier Muhammad B. Abd al Wahab al Ghassani to the Spanish court. It has been debated whether his only objectives were to recover some Arabic manuscripts and ransom several hundred Muslim captives, or as if also he hoped to negotiate a peace treaty. The Spanish Empire, governed by Charles II and the various factions of his court, was in steep decline. While Emperor Moulay Ismail was one of Morocco's most remarkable rulers of the early modern period, he modernized the army and carried out a vast plan of fortifying his principal cities, including those along the coast. He demonstrated his power by conquering three fortified ports belonging to Spain or England: La Mora, Tangier, and Larache. His self confidence and perhaps inflated reliance on his treaty with the French was such that he requested the hand of one of Louis the XIV's daughters. We wonder, therefore, whether his envoy Al Ghassani had a more important mission than taking several hundred captives and a few texts back to Morocco. Did he seek to have a treaty signed? And if so, what was he prepared to offer in return? Right. So these are just some examples. You had several ambassadors going back and forth, even during the Reconquista period, right? The Inquisition period too, right? So this was going on for hundreds of years, and I just wanted to give some of these examples. Now, I don't really have time to go into this, but like in this book, it shows that the climate was really harsh, for the people who were considered Moriscos, for the people who were of Moorish descent, who tried to remain in their homeland, right there in Al Andalus, right? And there's examples like this dude that I was just speaking about, who was a Moroccan ambassador. When he's given his observations of walking around in Spain, right? He says most of the descendants of the Christianized Muslims in Andujar are among the city's nobles, but their nobility is not valued as much as the kind transmitted by inheritance, like the titles of duke, count, and so forth. For these Ibn Siraj converts, all the nobility they enjoy today consists of inheriting the privilege of wearing a cross on the shoulder of their garment. The positions open to the remaining members of the family are in the secretariat, city government, police, and others that carry no great importance or authority, right? The purity of blood statutes were applied unevenly in the various institutions that adopted them so that descendants of Moriscos and Jews could evade them fairly easily, right? These were the people who were actually ruling Spain, but things got flipped on them so that now they, they obviously they weren't ruling anything anymore, right? And the purity of blood had been granted to pure Christians, right? Instead of it being to the people who, were the original Al Andalusians, as he called them, right? So that was just one more example. He gives an example of how he's going around through the streets in Madrid, and all these people are coming up to him. We are of the Muslim race, descendants of the Ulad es Sarraj. A certain number of natives of Granada who had official posts there kept their residence in Madrid. They would come to see us in the company of Don Alonso, a descendant of the King of Granada, and they traced their origin to the race that lived in Granada, right? And so, those are just some more examples. Of course, in order for them to even stay there, they had to convert to Christianity for the most part. So, once again, these are just examples. Go and read this book for yourself. There's several other examples. Once again, going to the whole slave trade narrative, right? Now, this is something that's told to us almost in reverse, right? We're just started off at slavery, and we don't even understand why, and we think that that's where we start. But in reality, right, you had several centuries of pale-skinned Europeans being enslaved by Moors, specifically by Moors. And if you understand this, then you can see why there would be some resentment towards our people, right? And now they want to start us off as slavery as if this is who we are. Okay, so we have to understand our history and understand how we fit into things, and then you can better understand how to interact with these different holidays and whatever is being promoted to us as a people. Period. Right. Without this understanding, you're pretty much just out here like a newborn baby, you know, with no understanding of who you are. And you don't even know that you're celebrating your own downfall. So I just wanted to share that and just go over some history that's not really spoken about that much. And also to let you know that um, we have a huge impact on not just the United States of America, but the entire world. All right. Um, this is another good book to check out: Crisis and Legitimacy in Atlantic American Narratives of Piracy, 1678 through 1865. A lot of great information in here. Think we're going real long, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut things down. You guys enjoy yourselves, enjoy your family. Hopefully, everybody hits that like and share button. Peace and love, more. As we're gonna go ahead and close things out. I want to thank you all for coming here, and just remind you once more to click that like and share button. And on that note, we getting up out of here. Peace.
Every day, billions of searches are conducted online, therefore it is critical that your company stands out to the small percentage of clients who are essential to your business. Our team of local digital marketing consultants and SEO experts is eager to help your company achieve its goals through a consultative approach, top Google rankings, and collaboration with industry experts. Here at Adept Marketing Solutions, we stand for integrity, dedication, ingenuity, and results. We know how to navigate the ever-changing digital landscape and what brands must do to succeed. Visit our website to see what we can do to help you reach your goals.
CareMore is a non-profit organization focused on providing goods and services to families and individuals in our underfunded communities in Central Ohio. We have created an online presence to reach members of our Central Ohio communities, as well as local events and meetings to give away supplies and donations throughout the city all year long. Visit our website to learn more and to send a donation.
Highest quality handmade fezzes. Crafted fez with the finest wool, complete with tassel and leather sweatband. Wear the national headdress of Moorish Americans with pride and respect. 3XL size fez is a comfortable fit for brothers with dreadlocks. Shipping worldwide. Go to moorishfez.com to order.
Don't let your history start at slavery. Join with Moorish Science Temple, a lawfully chartered Islamic organization, and proclaim your nationality while helping us uplift fallen humanity. Founded by American prophet Noble Drew Ali and consistently promoted plans for the betterment of humankind. We are located in Columbus, Ohio. Visit our website www.moorishamericans.com and follow us on social media. We hold live meetings on Zoom every Friday and Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Give us a call at 614-407-4394 if you would like to join or send donations to help us uplift fallen humanity.
Fez Caps blends Moorish style with modern streetwear hats. The cutting-edge design features Moorish symbols with a silk tassel on the dome of the cap. More than just a fashion statement, Fez Caps represents something powerful and ancient within you. Go to fezcaps.com to order your Fez Cap now.